This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Kylie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And a day after probably one of the best Super Bowls played in recent memory, we got basketball to talk about, people. It can't always be about the pigskin. And we got a lot of good stuff ahead of us. So I'm going to go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand NBA aficionado, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna, PNC, my brother from another mother. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw, live via satellite from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Were you watching the Super Bowl like I was, man?
I took part a little bit. I watched it to the bitter end and, saw one of the greatest comebacks, I think, in sports history. And all the 3-1 references that the New England Patriots scored 31 points unanswered, and how they related that to the NBA and the Golden State Warriors.
Amazing.
3-1 lead.
Just way too much time in our hands, bro.
It's just, I don't know.
Like this numbers thing tends to get frightening sometimes, just really frightening.
You can't lose in today's society, man, because the internet is going to come back and bring it up over and over and over again. But salute to all the fans, listeners of NBA Baseline. Hope you did enjoy the Super Bowl, but it's our time now, man. It's NBA basketball, full effect, front page news at all stops. And this is a great time to be alive, as they say. I can't wait to continue talking NBA basketball the rest of the season.
Definitely, and we have a great show lined up for you in a little bit. We have our special guest, Ashely Douglas. You may catch her as she's always contributing from our man Shaw on shawsports.net. You could also catch her on NBA Lead. She's also a part of Denver Stiffs, and she does a lot of great work, follows the Denver Nuggets, and she's going to help us kind of dig in on Denver. What exactly is going on out in Denver? Why is this team holding down the 8th seed? Is this something that we can expect up until the end of the season? She's going to help us answer that question. We also have a couple of interesting topics in our segment of The Drop. We do the little spotlight. We got a couple of guys out there we're going to throw out to you. Keep your eye on these dudes. They are balling, and they may actually help some of their teams make some serious moves as we go along to the NBA season. Yogi, Ferrell, Willy, Hermangomez, and Jrue Holiday. And then we'll also get into the upcoming rumors that have started to surface out in Philadelphia. A big from Philly possibly getting moved. Say it ain't so. We've been calling for it. Sounds like the Coangelos are starting to pick up the telephone and make things happen. We'll tell you which player that is and whether or not that is a good thing for the Sixers and anyone else who might be willing to make this thing happen. So we got a lot going on. We appreciate you and yours tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. We always encourage you to get at the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. Available on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Player FM, Microsoft TuneIn. Also available on Google Music and the Roku channel. You can also catch the NBA Baseline on our new website, 16 Wins a Ring. And also, you can catch us on NBALead.com. Big shout-outs to to Freeman and Fox, the Sports Brothers, Monday through Friday, covering South Florida sports. The Baseline NBA podcast is also simulcasted through those dudes. They hold it down. We give them the goods of the NBA, and they disseminate it to those who listen. So we encourage you to use any of these platforms that you find us on as we continue to be your go-to resource discussing all things in the association. You know how we do, and you know how we like to set it off. It's time now for the breakdown.
Time to break it
down. Put the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Kylie Warrenshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. This week on the breakdown, we have a great special guest on board who's going to help us really dissect and get into it's somewhat of a conundrum when we talk about this basketball team in the Western Conference. And I've scratched my head because when you look at this team in the last decade, there has really been some talented, some really quality players that have kind of found themselves playing for this basketball team, but they haven't been able to kind of lay their hat as their home. There hasn't been a level of permanency. And I think the fans out there are feeling it, And I think now it's coming to a point where the NBA community is beginning to feel it, because we're starting to see this basketball team show a level of competitiveness that we've been yearning for over the last few years. And to help us break down the conundrum that is the Denver Nuggets, we have our girl, Ashely Douglas. She is an on-camera basketball analyst. You can always catch her with shawsports.net. She's also a part of NBALead.com, also does contributions from Mile High Sports. Ashely, thank you for joining us this week here on The Baseline.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, Ashely, you are out there in the Denver area. And listen, I know everybody loves them some Broncos. I know everybody loves them some UC college football. But at most times, people tend to forget that there is a professional basketball team out there called the Denver Nuggets. I mean, they did have Carmelo Anthony out there. They even had AI, the answer, out there as well, too. But what is it about this Denver Nuggets fan base and this Denver Nuggets team, from your perspective, that has people still clamoring and wanting them to be the type of basketball team that we used to remember back in the mid-90s, the late 80s, when they were really, really a force in the Western Conference?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that Colorado sports fans are pretty loyal to the local Colorado region. I think that, players like Carmelo Anthony and Allen Iverson and, Chauncey Billups, of course, who was local from Colorado, those players have really generated a fan base in Colorado that is really loyal. And I think most recently in the 2012-2013 NBA season, the Nuggets were looking really good. We had a home record that was incredible. We couldn't lose. And, we lost Gallo there in the final stretch to the playoffs. And then we faced Golden State there in the first round loss. But I think Denver has gotten a recent taste of how good the Nuggets can truly be. And so there's still some of that lingering around where their fans are really excited to see them kind of get back to who they were.
So I want to talk about this current roster and the way it's built. There's some reason for optimism and there's some reason for skepticism, because this team seems to be a little bit uneven in terms of the balance of veterans and youth. And I think pretty much everyone on this roster has been mentioned in a trade rumor, with the exception of maybe Nikola Jokic at some point, one way or the other. What is your take on this roster and kind of where it's going this NBA season?
It's interesting because I think probably in December, I don't think Denver necessarily knew where it was headed. I mean, I think they probably had an idea, but they lacked an identity. And I think that's been the main issue for them, is they've got all these young guys, they've got this veteran talent. But the cool thing about Denver is they don't really have a superstar, but they kind of needed a guy. They needed somebody to build that team identity around. And that has been Nikola Jokic. I do think that, there's been some recent, rumors or whatever you want to call it, that the Nuggets are shopping Emmanuel Mudiay. And I think the problem has been they were running their identity through Emmanuel Mudiay because they had run it through Ty Lawson for so long. And when Lawson, had some personal issues, the Nuggets drafted Mudiay and thrust him into that role. And I don't think he was ready for it, and I don't think he was the right person for it. And so they kind of struggled with, who is this guy now? And I think Nikola Jokic, after that London game with the Indiana Pacers, has really emerged as their team face. And that's who they're now building around.
Ashely Douglas joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast in our breakdown segment as we're discussing the Denver Nuggets. I want to touch on that with regards to Jokic. What is it about it from your perspective, Ashely, that you enjoy about Jokic's game and really kind of gives us room to see a level of optimism for this organization and really to the NBA? I mean, it's really been a while since we've seen the Denver Nuggets tout a potential NBA All-Star, and a lot of people are talking about, if his game translates the way that it does, that they could definitely see him being an All-Star in years to come.
Yeah, I think Jokic brings what Denver's so excited about is the fact that Jokic is that kind of budding identity for the team. And not only that, he's such a likable guy. I mean, he got his first first career triple-double this past week. And the first thing he did was he got the whole team to sign it. And I think the Denver Nuggets, that's kind of who they are as a team. They really like to, it's a team atmosphere. And I think Jokic fits into that because A, he's not a big ego. Just, we face that big time. Jokic is kind of a humble guy. He is a team guy in that he shares the ball. He has a gift for passing that is unreal. And so I think he fits really well into that atmosphere. I think that's what Denver's so excited about, is that now they finally have this guy that not only is he so great and amazing, but he's really easy to like and he's really easy to get behind.
So we want to go back and touch a little bit on some of the things you discussed a little bit earlier. I think on our site here, Shaw Sports, you were one of the first to kind of openly criticize Emmanuel Mudiay and saying that he's probably not the leader and not the guy that this Denver Nuggets team should be building around, and he could potentially be trade bait. Again, as I mentioned in my earlier question, Gallinari, Wilson Chandler, Kenneth Freed, even Nurkic, all of these guys have been mentioned. Will Barton, in terms of trades. Who of that group do you think should be moved out that you can try to move forward with this Denver roster?
I think Emmanuel Mudiay, I think he's going to be a great backup, perhaps for Denver, maybe another team. But I think his problem has been a bit of hesitation to share the ball, which I don't know why. I think, Jusuf Nurkic is definitely something that the Denver Nuggets are looking to trade. I think he lacks energy when he comes on the court. He doesn't play with if you watch the Nuggets when he starts a game, it's like clockwork. They dig an early hole, double-digit point hole, and it's impossible to crawl out of because the momentum is shift to the other team, and it's just awful. So I think those two for sure probably could be, in discussions for a trade. Unfortunately, Wilson Chandler, from rumors, obviously I don't know whether this is true or not, but rumors state that he has mentioned wanting to leave Denver. He's unhappy apparently. And so anytime a guy is unhappy, it's only a matter of time before they're going to start to play that way. So I think those three are on the list. I hope nobody else. I really like what Gallinari brings to the team. I think he draws a big man out from under the rim. Obviously, he's an incredible sharp shooter. I think he's great on defense. Kenneth Farid is great on defense. Love Will Barton. But those three, Mudiay, Chandler, and Nurkic, I think are on the list.
Ashely, in an ideal world, if you were the GM and you have the ability to shop someone like an Emmanuel Mudiay, and you're given an option to bring a point guard in, when you look at the landscape of the NBA and you look at the personnel that you currently have right now with this Denver Nuggets roster team, because to me, the way I kind of get, where your critique is that you definitely want someone that can facilitate the basketball because you see playmaking ability with a lot of your front court players. Who would be an ideal point guard that you would like to see replace the role of what a Mudiay was supposed to bring to this Denver Nuggets basketball team?
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about this lately, and what I would do is I would go get Jimmy Butler all day, play him at the 2, put Jamal Murray at the 1. That's what he's used to. He is a point guard, and get him some more minutes there. Maybe start Jameer Nelson for a while and have Jamal come off the bench for Jameer, and definitely put Jimmy Butler at the 2.
So you're liking you love the game of Jamal Murray, and you'd love to see him actually not just get more minutes, but actually find himself as the actual starting point guard for this Denver Nuggets roster.
Absolutely. I really do think he's the future of our team, and along with Nikola Jokic. I think, Jamal Murray, when he comes into the game, his first thought is to pass the ball. Where is my teammate open? Obviously, he's a very sharp shooter, but his instinct is to play make. That's what he does. Versus Emmanuel Mudiay, where he plays more like a 2 guard, honestly. He wants to go score. And the only time he really passes is when he's in trouble, and then that produces the environment for turnovers.
Well, it makes some sense to me, and I think this Nuggets team has the requisite assets that could be used in a Jimmy Butler trade if Chicago was so inclined. But it probably would cost Denver some assets like a Gallinari, a Chandler, maybe Barton as well too. Don't know if Gary Harris would need to be in that mix and exactly what Chicago would want back. But my next question really regarding this team is the defense. This team has now found itself to be last, somehow surpassing the LA Lakers for the worst defense in the NBA. One of the best offenses in the league, ironically, but they just haven't gotten it together from a defensive mindset, especially from a guy like Coach Malone, who's pretty hard nosed and does preach defense. What is it about that side of the basketball where the Nuggets continue to struggle?
I think we continue to struggle with perimeter defense, starting with our guards. I think, Jameer Nelson is an incredible player, and I think he's a great addition to this team, but he's not a great defender. And I think that's been a struggle for the Nuggets because they've been relying on him. When Amudie's been hurt, Mudiay is not great on D either. And Gary Harris is great on defense, but he can only do so much on the perimeter. So I think that's really where it's going to start. I do think there is some room for improvement in our front court. Obviously, Nikola Jokic at the center is great. I would honestly love to see us trade for a center, put Nikola Jokic at the power forward, and really have some strong defense in that regard. Gallinari's defense is good. I think he has some room for improvement, but I think primarily we need some help in our backcourt.
Ashely Douglas joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Our segment of the breakdown as we're discussing the Denver Nuggets. Denver Nuggets currently, as we're recording this show, 22-28 and holding down the 8th seed in the Western Conference. Ashely, one of the things that I find interesting about this basketball team, like last year at this time, this team was basically 20-30 as of the beginning of February. And, we can kind of, make the argument that they had, 2 games from last year as far as pace goes and improving themselves. And clearly they're still in a position, to do something given the state of the Western Conference this season. I'm curious, though, because I look at this with a lot of teams right now that I think is going to suffer the same fate when GMs don't enact and enable themselves to really start rounding their rosters, whether it's for a short term or for the long term. And the longer that they continue to hold assets is the longer I think that they do a disservice to the longevity of a basketball franchise. And this is what I'm talking about with the Denver Nuggets. You really have some players on this roster, while they may still be considered fan favorites in some way, shape, or form, I feel like maybe their play and the levity of where the team might need to be in the next 3 to 5 years, they may not fit. And their value might get thwarted if they continue to stay on a roster with no sense of purpose, especially with a guy like Mike Malone, who I really think is more acquiesced to the younger players and really struggles when it comes to leaving veteran guys out there who are not going to be productive, for the long-term future. If you had opportunities to say which guys really need to get moved and should be moved by the trade deadline, which are those guys from your perspective when it comes to this team?
I think first and foremost, we need to help Jusuf Nurkic move on. Obviously, he's a young guy, but he's been playing for the Nuggets for about 3 years now. Really not doing much. He's clearly lost energy or doesn't want to play with energy. I don't know what. He can be great. That's what's so frustrating about him. He has such a potential. I think first and foremost, he has to go. Second, I struggle to say trade Jameer because I think for right now we do need his presence in the backcourt in terms of leadership because all of our guards are pretty young. But I think at some point, maybe in a year or so, he will be ready to go. Plus, he's also kind of getting up there in age. I think potentially, Wilson Chandler, again, I think has expressed his frustration in Denver, and he wants to leave. And I think at some point, potentially Kenneth Faried will need to move on as well. I think that, the Nuggets they're forming their identity right now. It's not completely clear what direction it's going to head, but I think maybe in the next 1 to 2 seasons, he could also make the move.
So point blank, going to ask you flat out, is this a team that is going to be making that 8th seed in the Western Conference? They have no chance really right now of getting any higher than back, but can they hold off, the Dallases and the Portlands and the New Orleans and the Sacramentos of the world in this Western Conference?
I think they can, and I think they will. I think there's some opinions out there in Denver that people would like to see them tank so that they can get a higher, draft pick. But I think, I follow the team closely, and I know that this is a team goal of theirs to make the playoffs. I think they're kind of on an emotional high right now because they're kind of finding it finally. So I do think they will make the playoffs in that, 8th seed. It's going to be a tough go because obviously they'll face Golden State. So I think obviously they'll end up, out pretty quickly. But, it may give the team an additional oomph if they're able to make the playoffs and meet that team goal and prove to themselves that they can do it.
Well, collectively, this Denver Nuggets team is one of the most explosive teams in the NBA offensively. And as Shaw had pointed out earlier, and you have also agreed to this as well, too, Ashley, the one thing you certainly hope for is that this team does improve themselves defensively to give themselves a puncher's chance to compete, for that 8th seed and to actually find themselves playing in the NBA playoffs, something that they haven't done in the last 3, 4, 5 years. She is the girl, and you can always catch her on shawsports.net, NBAlead.com. She's also contributed for Denver Stiffs, and you can also catch her on Mile High Sports Radio. Ashley, we so appreciate you hopping on board with us to help us break down the conundrum, but is hopefully going to be the charm of what should be one of the budgeting teams in the NBA, and that being the Denver Nuggets.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. Some really interesting stuff happening right now, Shaw, as we start doing our thing here on The Drop. I think we need to kind of wrap our arms around the status with the Philadelphia 76ers, the Colangelo family, and their desire to offload one of their bigs. I'd say it's about time, don't you think?
I would agree with you, man. Philadelphia finally, as you alluded to, trying to get rid of one of these talented bigs that they've kind of fell into, via the draft over the last couple of years here. And it's so ironic that a month and a half ago, we were talking about, okay, Nerlens Noel, he's on the move. He's got to go. We had our boy Kevin Rayfuse on the show from Drive and Dish and talking about Noel's going to be gone. And all of a sudden, we've shifted gears. And exactly what Kevin was saying on that show was that he'd like to see them move Jahlil Okafor, and that's whose name is coming up in trade rumors now for the Philadelphia 76ers.
For the life of me, I don't understand why Jahlil Okafor would be the first person to go. I mean, maybe I do understand it in some senses because as far as his upside potential, because he is such an offensively better player at this moment than maybe Nerlens Noel. I still find it hard to believe that they are quick to let, to put him out there. And maybe the idea and the potential, from what the reports are saying is that the New Orleans Pelicans are in serious talks with the Sixers about possibly getting Jahlil Okafor. Maybe I can understand that, albeit I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work. If the idea is that you bring Jahlil Okafor and then you move Anthony Davis to the 4, I'm trying to see how this plays, because I don't know if whether or not this is improving the team or just putting, two really, talented guys, and one still being, the better defensive guy than the other one, not saying that the New Orleans Pelicans is going to be a better defensive team because of it.
Lipstick on a pig. That's what we're looking at here for this Pelicans team, if that's what they're trying to do with Jahlil Okafor. It'd be ironic to me, though, that they'd get one Philadelphia center when they could have had Nerlens Noel, years ago, instead of having Jrue Holiday at the point guard situation. And I would feel like they're pretty happy with having Holiday instead. But Okafor doesn't really seem to fit their system. Another name that we'll mention here in a little bit, Brook Lopez, might be, because Lopez has now developed into kind of a stretch 5, if you will, a guy who's shooting threes on a regular basis and knocking them down. Okafor is going to be very, very paint heavy and clogging the lane, if you will. And the Pelicans aren't a great shooting team. So to bring a guy like that now who's going to kind of be in the paint and not allow Davis to go in there when he wants to, that seems to be a move that's being made out of desperation. And I guess you'd have to be desperate when you have a guy like Anthony Davis kind of toiling and wasting away here. And this Pelicans team needs to make the playoffs by all accounts. All the reports and papers are saying that Dell Demps, the general manager, is on the hot seat, and he's trying to make a big splash to get this Pelicans team towards that 8 seed.
Yeah, listen, I have no problem with Demps being desperate and trying to make a splash. The problem that I have with it is that I think that, while making a splash, does it mean that you have to drown the whole island? That to me is the problem with Demps. Let whatever move you're trying to make be a move of logic. And I think the other thing as well, too, don't allow someone as a GM, if you're the owner, okay? And I still think that Benson, he's still the owner, correct? For the New Orleans Pelicans.
Yep.
Don't allow him, Demps, to pull a move that's going to set your franchise back. And then at the very least, still you wind up losing your best player in Anthony Davis. See, that to me is the type of nonsense that absolutely doesn't make sense. And there are now also reports that the Philadelphia 76ers are trying to see if maybe the possibility of bringing Jrue Holiday back, to the Sixers family after they eloquently let him go in order to position themselves the way that they did to get Anthony Davis and company, out of the NBA draft. See, to me, when these type of things happen, it kills the New Orleans Pelicans. And in my mind, I don't care if your intent is to ride with Alvin Gentry or not. What you're trying to do is you're trying to make this team a better basketball team. And I don't know how or where Jahlil Okafor naturally playing the 5 position, moving Anthony Davis to the 4 position is holistically making this a better basketball team. Might make this a more dynamic front court, but we've seen this time and time again. You can only continue to play that card so long if this does not result, if this move does not result in wins.
2 schools of thought, I think, on this move, potentially, if it were to happen, is that Okafor's still young. This is a guy who was a number 3 pick a couple of years ago, and people are saying, listen, people were selling him short already.
So it's like a Presti play, like how you alluded to when the Oklahoma City Thunder went and got Victor Oladipo, because they were looking at it saying, hey, we're improving the roster to Kevin Durant, when they're really masking the idea like, look, just in case Kevin Durant is really out the door, we're not set behind knowing that we still have Russell Westbrook. Is this what we're talking about here?
Well, not exactly, because Davis he's supremely locked up. He's got at least another 4 years on that deal. Remember, he signed that mass extension a couple of years ago, and he doesn't have a trade clause or anything like that. He's locked in. So if he were to leave, it's still not from 4 seasons from now if that were to happen. And I think there again, it really just a talent deficiency that they're trying to get rid of and allow them, like you said, to have a kind of a dynamic front court potentially with Okafor and Davis. I just don't know if those parts in essence fit together. The one thing that I'll say that they're being smart about is that they're trying to heavily protect the draft pick if they were to move and get a guy like Jahlil Okafor. They're not looking at anybody in this year's draft. So 2017 draft is off the table with it being quote unquote a loaded draft. They're looking at 2018 and again trying to heavily protect it, at least lottery protect it in case they don't make the playoffs. In that regard, I think they're being smart about it, not just saying, hey, we'll just give you unprotected first rounder and just give us back Okafor. This, which is crazy when you think about it from Philadelphia's standpoint, because again, this is a guy who again was a number 3 pick in the NBA draft last year. So Philadelphia is trying to say, listen, we need some less restrictions on that, and we'll see if that deal gets done. But I'm more interested in seeing what New Orleans does if they try to get into the pockets of the Brooklyn Nets and get Brook Lopez, because that has far-reaching implications on both sides of the basketball for New Orleans, for Brooklyn, and even the Celtics, which would acquire Brooklyn's pick. The Celtics, the Nets would be supremely worse getting a guy like Alex Ajenka or Omer Sheik back, going back to that roster, which would almost secure the Nets that first-round pick, meaning it would go to the Boston Celtics, and that could really change the landscape of the Eastern Conference.
How much are you feeling the idea about Brook Lopez possibly going to the New Orleans Pelicans from a talent perspective? Could you see him playing next to an Anthony Davis?
I like it better than Okafor, but I think the other flip side of that is Okafor's, a lot younger. And I don't want to say less injury prone, because Okafor definitely had his share of injuries this season. But it just depends how quickly and how soon you're trying to win. And I think they're trying to win now. I think Lopez probably gives them the best opportunity to do that. But that would be this year. And then even going into next, when they're trying to retain Jrue Holiday and potentially even Tyreke Evans on that roster, they have a lot of things that they're trying to figure out. And you got to also take into play, okay, well, who's going to fit next? Who's going to fit best next to Buddy Hield and Anthony Davis as well, too. So Hield and Lopez, I think they could play well together. Hield, if he does develop, he can maybe give them the spacing to let Okafor to move down low. But that's Demp's job to really kind of figure out what's the best situation for them. So win now and win for the future. That might be Okafor if you think he can really develop. But I think the better player right now is obviously Brook Lopez.
I got to tell you, man, this year is like fool's gold for the lower seeds in the Western Conference. Let's look at it for what it is, Shaw. If half of the teams that played, last season are playing as well as they should be playing this year, how desperate do you think the New Orleans Pelicans really should or could be at this particular moment in time if the thought process was we've got to win and we've got to win now? In other words, when I look at the teams that are filling up the lower end of the back end of this playoff seeding so far. The Memphis Grizzlies, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Denver Nuggets. And you're looking at the Memphis Grizzlies and the Denver Nuggets essentially being 8 games above 500 respectively for each of these teams. And then the 8th place team is a team that's 6 games under 500 with 3 or 4 teams in a log jam trying to get that 8th seed. I mean, how desperate are we truly being about them saying that they have to win now at the expense of, if you're making a trade, whether it be for Okafor or maybe even for Lopez, that ultimately this is going to yield the beginning of something? Because I look at the rest of this roster and they have got a long way to go before we talk about whether they win now, win later, win next millennium. I mean, they got to do some things in order to really buy the Pelicans fan base and the idea that winning essentially is going to equate sustained winning moving forward.
No, it doesn't. I mean, and again, I think this is a more or less a selfish play of ownership, because I think the pressure is on Demps to win and to win now, get into the playoffs, get some exposure for that team, and that comes from the ownership. However, smart to play here is, what are you racing to? You're racing to the 8th seed to get waxed by Golden State in the first round? Like, what purpose does that serve? It's the same thing that happened to them a couple of years ago when they finished 45-37 and played Golden State and got waxed in the first round. What is the point of that? So to me, in a loaded draft, in a loaded free agent class, why not get better that way? And if you need to clean house with Demps or whatever the case may be, then that's fine. But again, Demps is the one who's controlling the strings here. So he's like, all right, well, if I don't have enough time to really kind of convince this owner that, okay, let's not worry about this season right now, it's already kind of a wash. Let me build through the draft and see what we can do in free agency. If he feels like he's out of time, well, then that's the type of move that you're seeing right now being discussed in the rumors.
Now, how likely is it, do you think, that a third team is going to have to come into play for either one of these teams?
In terms to get a deal done, I don't think that's necessary right now. They have both teams, or all 3 teams have pieces in place that the other one likes per se. So I think New Orleans might like Okafor than Philadelphia likes what New Orleans may be giving back. Brooklyn, on the other hand, might be very interested in just trying to get some draft picks back after getting raped by the Boston Celtics, in that Pearson-Garnett trade. So I feel like Brooklyn is probably more anxious to say, here's Brook Lopez, give us something back in return, as opposed to maybe the Philadelphia 76ers, who feel like, we have these bigs that people are going to want. We can kind of sit back and wait for the best offer.
All right, you're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our segment of The Drop. All right, Shaw. So now let's go ahead and shed a little light, the Baseline spotlight. We got 3 interesting players that I think you have been looking at, been eyeing very intently, and they've been showing up. You look at the Dallas Mavericks, a basketball team, Shaw, that's really been desperate to kind of solidifying or building some kind of backcourt for the future. They've been putting together, this kind of mosh pit of backcourt play, Jason Kidd all the way to Darren Williams, Devin Harris, Juan Barrera. I mean, my goodness, man, it's like it's patchwork over there for Dallas. But the game of Yogi Ferrell, a guy who's basically undrafted, unproven, but has the heart of a champion. And don't let his little stature fool you, bro. This guy comes out and he balls hard. I don't know if he's sipping on that IT juice, for the Celtics have out there, but he's playing like he's like a little IT for the Dallas Mavericks.
He is, really and truly. And I think what's been most impressive about what he's been able to do is the plus minutes that he's come in and played immediately. In the 4 games he's been in Dallas as of this recording, he's playing roughly 38 minutes a night, averaging almost 18 a game, 5 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, shooting 52% from the 3-point line, 44% from the floor. Those are stellar numbers for a guy of any size, and Dallas loves him. They went ahead and just said, we don't need to give you a second 10-day and prolong this process. They inked him to a 2-year deal immediately, which probably means they understand that the writing is on the wall for Darren Williams, which we all know it kind of has been, and as well as Devin Harris and JJ Barea, who hasn't been able to stay healthy this entire year. Yogi Ferrell is a great story. I think we was reading that he was debating about going to China or going somewhere overseas to play, where Dallas was like, hey, D-Will went down again. Why don't you come over? We'll give you a workout. And he's been injected into this lineup of playing great basketball.
All right, let's go ahead and switch gears and Listen, while the New York Knicks is just having a travesty of a season and most of their headlines is in the back, is actually off the court rather than what they should be doing on the court. One of the more pleasant surprises for this basketball team is the play of Willy Hermangomez. And, you talked about this guy, Shaw. You love how this guy plays. He balls hard, has a little attitude to him, kind of gives the Knicks a little bit of that 90s swagger that they had back in the day when they had the Oak Man, Mason and those boys. He plays like that. He's not afraid to back down. He plays big, even though his stature doesn't matches up to most guys that played at 5. Hornacek has a little hidden gem in there in New York land with Hermangomez.
I agree, man. He's got to get the minutes, I think, moving forward. It's time that this Noah project, this experiment just hasn't worked. And the reason that Hermangomez...
The arc has crashed. We understand. Yes,
the arc has crashed. It's time to free Willy. Real talk, because Hermangomez is that dude who's come in there in the minutes that Noah has vacated due to injury and played great basketball, especially over the last week or so. Was averaging a double, 15 and roughly 12 or 16 and 12 really is what you want to call it if you want to round up, 4 assists. Ironically, those are very Noah-esque type numbers in Noah's heyday. You know what I mean? Where he can get those doubles and be a nice guy who can pass out of that post and out of that mid-post position, if you will. Not a great defender, but gets a block a game and he's still learning the NBA game. Got to stay out of foul trouble and work on his strength a little bit too. But he's a great energy guy, man. He's doing a great job for the Knicks when he's getting the minutes. And I'd like to see him get some plus minutes moving forward, keeping him in that 30ish to 32-minute range and putting Noah on the bench.
Well, we'll see what happens if the New York Knicks somehow figures out a way to facilitate this movement of Carmelo Anthony. I really think that does open up a plethora of minutes where Hornacek is going to have to figure out a way to get this team to offensively be efficient without their top scorer, without a Hall of Fame scorer in Carmelo Anthony. But I will say this, Hermangomez is a guy that I think Derrick Rose would love to play pick and roll play with, because as he continues to develop his game, I've seen this guy, man, this guy puts boulder picks on people. Like, seriously, like, he may not, size up to most of the other bigs, but the way he sets picks for his Knicks guards, you would almost think that he's like a DeMarcus Cousins or an Andre Drummond. And I think that that's definitely a good thing if his game can continue to improve. Definitely a hidden weapon, so to speak, for Hornacek and his offensive play sets. All right, Shaw, let's round out our baseline spotlight. And it's, an oldie, but a goodie, even though this guy is all of but 25, 26 years of age at this point in his young yet injury prone like career. Jrue Holiday, man, when we saw this guy coming out of Philadelphia, we said he is the future for the Sixers. And then in a moment's notice, in a blink of an eye, he winds up in New Orleans. And I don't know what voodoo got put on him, man, but he has just not been the same since. But ever since, though, he has kind of gotten himself fully healthy. And we've said this, if he's fully healthy and fully engaged, he could be one of the most deadliest point guards in the NBA. And we're kind of seeing that come to fruition once again, him being a Pelican.
Yeah, Jrue Holiday is a guy who does it well on both ends of the basketball floor. Kind of an underrated defender, really kind of sneaky good. Because he's not a big steals guy. He's not obviously not blocking a bunch of shots, but just kind of stays in the way and and makes it tough on his opponent. But more importantly, offensively, he's really just hit another level in the last week or so. 22.8 per game, 8.2 assists, 4.8 rebounds, 1.2 steals, shooting 52%, almost making 2 threes a game as well. Holiday really coming on for this New Orleans Pelicans team as they make their push, as we just alluded to a little while ago, for that 8th seed in the Western Conference. And I think the other thing about this, obviously, after dealing with the issue with his wife to begin the year, to see him really kind of hit stride now and kind of get in the groove of this NBA season is great to see. But the flip side is he's also boosting his value for the summer. He is an unrestricted free agent. So teams looking out there saying, look at this guy. Jrue Holiday might be back. He's going to get a nice paycheck, whether that's from New Orleans or another team coming up this summer.
Yeah, here's the thing, and I don't seem to understand this. Why is it to me when I look at Jrue Holiday, there seems to still be a struggle for Holiday to play this well, this consistently under Gentry? I don't know if whether or not he had this kind of struggle with with Monty Williams, because Monty Williams was, by most who thought of him as a more defensive-minded type of guy, and maybe that gave Jrue Holiday a little bit more freedom offensively to help facilitate the basketball, get the ball, to Anthony Davis, thus catapulting that Pelicans team to that playoff bound opportunity that they had. But since Gentry, I've not seen the consistency and the greatness and that fluidity that we talked about. If he stays healthy, could help this Pelicans team and would be a great combination for years to come for an Anthony Davis. So I'm curious to get your perspective. Am I crazy in the way that I'm thinking about this? And I'm not trying to place blame on Gentry. Sometimes people take what I'm saying going overboard with it at times. This is just purely from my understanding on someone like a Jrue Holiday not being able to fit in an offensive-minded system like Gentry, that he can do this consistently.
Well, to me, I think it's the fall of a lot of different things going on here in terms of we just talked about this New Orleans Pelicans, their overall front office management. They don't really seem to have a clear direction. And I think that roster has been uneven. It's also been injured, and people haven't really been there to play the full allotment of minutes. I had a chance to speak to Tyreke Evans a couple of weeks ago when he was lamenting exactly that. I was like, damn, when Ryan and Eric Gordon were there, we're just, we couldn't all get on the same page. And I think Holiday has been a victim of that as a point guard, because I think he needs to know what the flow of the game is going to be like. Who's going to be on the floor with him running around when he's out there? And how does he get these people in their spots, per se? And I think he's had a difficult time because the roster just hasn't been healthy, and that includes even Anthony Davis over the couple of years that he's been in the league as well, too. I think that has a lot to do with Holiday's inconsistency, if you will. But we've all known from that last year that he was in Philadelphia and they made the playoffs how good he could potentially be. But I think those factors have really played against him and how he can be consistent on this team in addition to his own injuries.
Well, listen, I think we're going to start seeing a resurgence once again of the Southwest Division, hopefully in years to come, where that backcourt play becomes an important factor on how we look at where teams stand. You got the San Antonio Spurs with a Javonte Murray, might possibly be replacing a Tony Parker, and you still have Patty Mills. The Houston Rockets with James Harden and Patrick Beverley. The Memphis Grizzlies with Mike Conley. You have the Dallas Mavericks hopefully opening a door and opportunity for a Yogi Ferrell to stake his claim. And if all things considered, Jrue Holiday continues to be that dude, and maybe he sees the potential in the future of the Pelicans still being in that viable basketball team to ascend to greatness out of this division, maybe he stays put. But we are definitely seeing some heady backcourt play in the Southwest Division, and it lies with the two teams that might be wallowing in the back of that division, but certainly are making competitive play and making the Southwest a lot more interesting to watch as we move forward to the rest of the season. You're tuned to The Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, and this was The Drop.
Coast to coast.
Time now to go coast to coast, discussing the news in the association. You ready to rock and roll, Mr. Shaw?
Absolutely, man. Let's ride.
All right, out in Utah, bad news. The Hood ain't good right now. Rodney Hood, he is going to be out at least a week. How big of an impact shall this be for the top seeded in the Northwest Division, Utah Jazz?
Well, I don't know how much it impacts them currently. I think it's going to hurt them if he's going to miss any more time than that. This team knows how to play with injuries. They are pretty much the New Orleans Pelicans, if you will, of their division, always have somebody out. But they just seem to be doing a little bit more, in terms of winning and getting past those injuries, despite not having their top guys throughout. So hopefully Hood comes back quickly. But again, it's just another day in the neighborhood for the Utah Jazz, man.
All right. Big trade taking place. Well, I'd say big, not in the magnitude of the trade, just really in the height. The Milwaukee Bucks, they move Miles Plumlee, and then in return, they get Roy Hibbert and Spencer Hawes. So Miles Plumlee finds his way in the Crescent City, in Charlotte, and our man Roy Hibbert, Rude Boy Roy, once again on the move out there in Milwaukee with the man who carries the Fu Manchu like no other, with Spencer Hawes. Are we liking this trade, Shaw?
It's an interesting trade. I think I like it from Milwaukee's standpoint, getting the salary dump of Plumlee off their roster. I think they inked him for 4 years, $50 million, which nobody understood even in today's market. Like, he's not doing anything. So why is he getting that much money? And then you get Hibbert and Hawes, who are both coming off the books after this season, and you can use those guys, Hawes to stretch the floor, Hibbert, to play some spot minutes and clog the paint alongside Drew Henson. So maybe it works out. I think I like it better from Milwaukee's standpoint than I do Charlotte. For them, I just don't understand, but they feel like they wanted to get a physical presence out there and someone they can maybe pair alongside Batum and Kemba Walker out there to kind of be an enforcer. So, whatever, but I like it better from Milwaukee's side a lot better.
All right, out in Sacramento, seems like the Sacramento Kings are adopting the Trump-like way of sending messages to the rest of the world. Mixed messages. Can't really quite put a finger on what exactly they're trying to say, especially to their superstar player, DeMarcus Cousins. What up with that, Shaw?
Listen, this Sacramento team is so confusing in terms of their front office management, and to some degree, I get it. DeMarcus is a generational, once-in-a-lifetime type big, and you don't trade him lightly. But don't go out there like, oh, well, we're thinking about moving him, and then it comes, oh, no, never mind. That's really starting to piss teams off, and really just, they're going to get stuck, if you will, holding the bag at one point, especially because he decides to blow up and decides that he does not want to be there anymore. Currently, he's obviously going to play nice because he can get the most amount of money from Sacramento, and I think our guy Leo Baez had mentioned, listen, he'll re-sign there because he can get that money, but that doesn't mean he won't get traded after that. But if they keep messing around with these other GMs and kind of like dangling them, then taking them off the table, that's really going to ruin relationships for any type of future team.
All right, Shaw, out in Minnesota, bad news, man. I mean, this guy, amazing dunks, two-time slam dunk champion, but really just the improved play for the Minnesota Timberwolves despite a disappointing season. Zach LaVine out for the season. Shaw, big blow for Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm very hurt, by this. LaVine was a guy who could have been one of the most improved candidates, right up there with Giannis and even Jabari Parker and guys of that nature. And see him go down after he said he wasn't going to participate in the dunk contest because he wanted to focus on staying healthy and being right for his team down the stretch of the season. Now to see him go down, that really is a tough blow for a really good kid. It's going to give Shabazz Muhammad, I think, some more touches out there to look at a great look at him to kind of figure out what his future is for this team. But damn, it really sucks to see Zach go down and see anybody go down. But again, LaVine's a really good kid.
All right, and finally, Shaw, out in Boston, really a great way to end things. The truth comes back to the Garden one last time, really going out in style, so to speak. Last game in Boston, I mean, what more can be said? Celebrating the career of really one of Boston's purest, probably best scorers that they've ever had. And really just a really classy way to end things for Paul Pierce in his final time at the TD Garden.
That was great to watch. That was amazing basketball theater, amazing sports theater on an amazing sports day. With the Super Bowl ending the way it did as well too. But to see Pierce go in there, hit that last three, IT playing the loose defense on it, if you will, him kissing the leprechaun in the middle of the court. That's just great basketball and great theater in general, as alluded to. And listen, Paul Pierce is going to forever be a Celtic. After this season, he'll probably come back, work in that front office, and do some stuff in the community as well. But again, if you weren't watching that, make sure you check us out on our IG page, seeing him hit that three, and just the emotion that was captured in that moment.
Yeah, definitely. One of the more memorable moments I think we'll talk about when it comes to legendary players who are there playing for the last time, kind of like that send-off. We talk about Jeter, we talk about Big Papi, David Ortiz, and what they did in their final season. And while, Paul Pierce, by default, is going to probably see himself playing in this upcoming NBA playoffs, clearly you can see that, he's not being utilized nearly as much as I'm sure that he would like to find himself being. But this is what happens when Father Time has passed away, a lot of wear and tear on his body. But to see the Boston faithful embrace him the way that they have, and they've always recognized him no matter where he's gone, whether it's been to Brooklyn, whether it's been to Washington, whether it's been to Los Angeles, he will forever and always be a Celtic. And look, man, he could do no wrong because he's responsible for that Celtics basketball team to have a championship in the 2000s. And until that changes, he's going to be held on a very high pedestal because Boston fans love them some Celtics basketball. What an awesome show this week, Shaw. Really good stuff. And, it's always great to be able to get young, minds like an Ashely Douglas on board with us this week to really talk about teams that we don't get an opportunity to talk about. And she definitely has her finger on the pulse with things happening with the Denver Nuggets. And just really some really good stuff happening before we even get to NBA All-Star Weekend with the trade rumors with Okafor. So just really an all-around great show, bro.
I mean, I have a great time doing the show with you, man, as we kind of cruise into All-Star Weekend, and we'll definitely get our predictions for some of the things that are contests that are taking place around that. But, in the meantime, we got to handle business, and I think we did a great job bringing our girl Ashely Douglas on here to talk about the Denver Nuggets. A lot of New Orleans Pelicans talk out there as well, too. So stayed a little Western Conference heavy in this conversation, this show. But, again, it was a lot of fun. I can't wait to get back on the line with you next time, man.
Yeah, definitely, man. Of course, we're going to have our coveted Power 5 that we'll be doing for this upcoming week as well, too. And there's still a lot of storylines that still need to be played out as we start getting a little bit closer, not just to the NBA All-Star Weekend, but also the NBA trade deadline. So there's going to be some important timelines that we're going to have to kind of keep in mind, and they will sneak up on us very, very, very quickly. And they may impact some teams and may also shift the dynamics of what we're already seeing between these conferences respectively. Once again, we'd like to thank our special guest, Ashely Douglas, for jumping on board with us. For the Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do. And we'll catch up with you next time.